You who are here, get ready to dive into the depths of a mystery that defies understanding and awakens a lot of attention and curiosity from everyone to this day. Today, we will reveal the fascinating and terrifying question: why did Satan so intensely desire Moses' body after his death? This is not a mere theological curiosity, but a journey into darkness, where angels and demons fight battles that shape the destiny of humanity. Moses and his epic journey. Moses, the legendary liberator, led the Israelites from Egyptian slavery to the Promised Land. He was not just a leader but the intermediary between God and his people, bringing the Ten Commandments, a beacon of hope in dark times. So, folks, Moses was chosen to free the Israelites from Egyptian slavery, a feat that is impressive in itself. Imagine the scene: a man facing the most powerful pharaoh of the time, defying everything and everyone with a courage that seems impossible. The plagues, the Red Sea parting, the people crossing safely while the Egyptian army is swallowed by the waters. It's chilling just to think about it, right? But Moses' journey doesn't stop there. He leads the people through the desert, facing unimaginable difficulties. During this time, he not only leads but also becomes the mediator between God and the Israelites. It was he who received the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, an iconic scene where God, in all his majesty, descends amid thunder and lightning to deliver the sacred laws. Moses, with the tablets in hand, descends from the mountain with his face shining, transfigured by the divine presence. Just imagine the pressure of bearing this responsibility. He had to deal with a frequently rebellious and ungrateful people, but he persisted. Moses was not just a leader, he was a savior, a prophet, someone who always stood between God and his people, fighting for them, interceding for them, even when they did not deserve it. And even with all these feats, Moses was human. He made mistakes, had moments of weakness, and, like all of us, faced the consequences of his actions. But his epic journey is a testament to faith, resilience, and how a person can be a powerful instrument in the hands of God. So, when we talk about Moses and his journey, we are not just talking about a historical man. We are talking about someone who faced titanic challenges, who had a direct connection with the divine, and who, despite his flaws, left a legacy that still resonates today. Moses is an example of how a life dedicated to faith and mission can change the course of history. The fatal sin and the death of Moses. Before reaching the Promised Land, Moses made a terrible mistake by disobeying God, striking the rock instead of speaking to it. This act of anger and despair had severe consequences, preventing him from seeing the fulfillment of his divine mission. Now let's talk about a crucial moment in Moses' life, one of those episodes that makes you hold your breath and think, seriously, did that really happen? I'm talking about the fatal sin that prevented Moses from entering the Promised Land. So, here's the scenario. Moses had led the Israelites for decades, facing all kinds of challenges. He witnessed incredible miracles, spoke directly with God, and maintained the people's faith in difficult times. But even the greatest heroes have their moments of weakness, and Moses was no different. It happened like this: the people of Israel were thirsty in the desert and, as usual, began to complain. God then spoke to Moses and said, "Speak to that rock over there, and water will come out for the people to drink." Simple, right? But Moses, already exhausted and frustrated with all the complaints and murmuring, lost his patience. He took his staff and, instead of speaking to the rock, struck it twice. This may seem like a minor detail, but it was a significant mistake. In a fit of rage, Moses said something like, "Must we bring water for you?" Not giving credit to God for the miracle. It was a moment of carelessness, where he let his personal frustration show, and it cost him dearly. God, seeing this, was disappointed. It was as if Moses had forgotten, even for a moment, who was truly in charge. As a result, God told Moses that he would not enter the Promised Land. It was a harsh blow for someone who had dedicated so much for so long. Imagine how Moses must have felt at that moment. He spent his entire life leading these people, facing countless trials, and now, because of one mistake, he couldn't complete the journey. It was a bitter but powerful lesson. Even the greatest leaders are fallible and must always remember their dependence on God. And so, Moses died there, at the edge of the Promised Land, on Mount Nebo, seeing from afar the destiny he would never reach. God, in a gesture of mercy and friendship, buried him in a secret place, away from the eyes of the world. Even in death, Moses was under divine care, protected from the people's desire for idolatry. This part of Moses' story connects us in a very real and human way. We have all felt frustrated and made mistakes in moments of weakness. And Moses' story reminds us that even with our mistakes, there is grace and mercy, but also consequences. It's a lesson about leadership, responsibility, and the importance of fully trusting God, even in the most challenging times. The secret burial of Moses. After his death, God buried Moses in an unknown location, away from mortal eyes. This mysterious burial is one of the most enigmatic events in Scripture, a divine protection against malevolent forces. Now, let's talk about one of the most mysterious and intriguing moments in the Bible, the secret burial of Moses. Imagine the scene. Moses, the great leader, had just died, and God decides to personally take care of his burial. You can already feel the weight and mystery of this, right? Moses died on Mount Nebo, overlooking the Promised Land, a land he led the Israelites to but would never enter himself. After decades of leadership, miracles, and a life dedicated to God and his people, Moses bids farewell to the world. And this is where the story takes an even more fascinating turn. Instead of a common burial, God decides to bury Moses in a secret place, in the land of Moab. Think about that for a moment, God himself coming down to take care of Moses' body. This is not just a demonstration of care and respect but also an act of divine protection. But why did God do this? Well, there are several possible reasons, and they all add a layer of mystery and solemnity to this story. First, there's the issue of idolatry. Moses was such an important and revered figure that if the people knew where he was buried, they might start venerating his tomb, turning it into a place of idolatry. God knew it was essential to keep the people's focus on true worship, not on a leader, no matter how important he was. Another reason could be protection against enemies. At that time, bodies of important figures were often targets of desecration by enemies. Burying Moses in an unknown place ensured that his body would not be violated or used disrespectfully. Additionally, Moses' secret burial underscores the unique relationship he had with God. Moses was not just a servant but a friend of God. The Bible even says that God spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. This intimacy is reflected in this final act of personal care. Finally, the secrecy surrounding Moses' burial site also creates an aura of respect and reverence around his death. It's as if God were saying that although Moses was not perfect, he deserved a dignified rest, away from curious eyes and the future temptations of the people to idolatry. This part of Moses' story is a powerful reminder of the greatness of his legacy and the importance of obedience and humility before God. It also shows God's care and mercy, who, even after death, looks after his faithful servants. It is a worthy end for the life of a man who dedicated everything to fulfilling the divine will, leaving an eternal example of leadership, faith, and devotion. The celestial dispute, and then something astounding happened. A fierce dispute between Archangel Michael and Satan over the body of Moses. This is not a fairy tale but a dark reality mentioned in the book of Jude, verse 9. Michael and Satan, in a titanic struggle, fought a battle whose echoes still reverberate today. And now, let's delve into the most supernatural and electrifying part of this story, the celestial dispute over Moses' body. Seriously, if you thought you had seen everything, this part will leave you speechless. Imagine this. Moses had just died, and then an epic quarrel begins between Archangel Michael and Satan. Yes, you heard it right. This is not a fantasy story but something the Bible actually mentions in the book of Jude, verse 9. It's like a movie-worthy battle, only in the heavens and with stakes beyond our comprehension. So, here's the scene. Moses died and was buried by God in a secret place, but Satan was not happy about this at all. He wanted Moses' body at all costs. Then, enters Archangel Michael, the celestial guardian, sent by God to protect the great leader's body. Why, you might ask, would Satan be so interested in Moses' mortal remains? There are some frightening theories. First, Satan could want to prevent Moses from being resurrected or elevated to heaven, as happened with Elijah. He knew Moses was a key figure in God's plan and wanted to thwart this plan at all costs. Another possibility is even more sinister. Satan could want to use Moses' body as an object of idolatry. Imagine the Israelites finding the tomb and turning it into a place of worship. This would divert their worship from God to Moses, something Satan would love to see happen. Additionally, Satan is known as the accuser. He could want the body to accuse Moses of his past sins, such as the murder of the Egyptian or the disobedience in striking the rock. He wanted to discredit Moses before God and men. But fortunately, Michael was there to stop these diabolical plans. The Bible tells us that Michael did not argue or engage in physical confrontation with Satan. Instead, he simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." This shows that God's power is much greater than any attempt by Satan. This celestial battle is a powerful reminder that there are invisible forces at work all the time, and that God's purposes are protected by His angels. It is also a warning to us about the seriousness of spiritual warfare. It is not just a physical or earthly struggle but something that happens on a much deeper level. And there, in the midst of this battle, we see the victory of divine protection. God took care of Moses until the end, ensuring that his work and legacy remained intact, away from Satan's wicked hands. It's a story that mixes mystery, action, and a good dose of supernatural suspense. So, the next time you think of Moses, remember not only his great deeds in life but also the celestial struggle that happened at his death. It is a reminder that, even in the darkest and most complicated situations, God's protection is always present, taking care of His faithful in ways beyond our comprehension. The sinister interest of Satan. Why did Satan, the Prince of Darkness, desire Moses' body so much? One possibility is that he wanted to prevent Moses' resurrection, trying to challenge and subvert divine plans. So, folks, let's talk about something truly sinister: Satan's almost obsessive interest in Moses' body. Seriously, what was going through the Prince of Darkness's mind to want the remains of a deceased leader so badly? This is where the story gets even more intriguing. First, we need to understand who Satan was in this context. He was not just the bad guy of the story but the great opponent of God's plans, always trying to ruin everything divine. Now, imagine the scene. Moses, the man who led the Israelites out of slavery, the guy who brought the 10 Commandments directly from God, was dead. For Satan, this was a golden opportunity. One of the theories is that Satan wanted to prevent any kind of resurrection of Moses. He knew Moses was crucial in God's plans, and if he could control his body, he might prevent a triumphant return or even some form of spiritual ascension, like Elijah. This is a very dark thought, right? Another idea is even more macabre. Satan could have planned to turn Moses' body into an object of idolatry. Think about it. The Israelites find the body and start venerating the tomb, completely diverting worship from God to Moses. Satan knew that if he could make the people idolize Moses, he would be undermining their faith in God. And, let's face it, turning something sacred into an object of idolatry is totally Satan's style. And it doesn't stop there. Satan is also known as the Great Accuser. He could be planning to use Moses' body to remind everyone of the mistakes and sins he committed. Remember when Moses killed an Egyptian or disobeyed God by striking the rock instead of speaking to it? Satan could use these episodes to accuse Moses and discredit him completely, even after his death. Additionally, the very act of possessing Moses' body would be a way for Satan to mock God. Imagine him saying, "Look, God, I have your great leader's body. Now what?" It would be a direct provocation and an insult to the divine plan. But fortunately, God did not let this happen. He sent Michael, the archangel, to ensure that Satan's plans would not come to fruition. Michael did not need an epic battle of swords and fire. He simply invoked God's authority, saying, "The Lord rebuke you." And that was enough to put an end to Satan's ambitions. This episode is a powerful reminder that no matter how cunning and evil Satan's plans are, God's power and protection are always greater. It is a message of hope for all of us, showing that God takes care of His own, even in the most desperate and seemingly hopeless situations. So, when we think of Satan's sinister fascination with Moses' body, we are not just looking at a frustrated diabolical attempt. We are seeing a clear example of how divine light always triumphs over darkness, ensuring that the legacy of the righteous remains untouched. It is a story that connects us directly to God's protective power and reminds us of the importance of keeping our faith unwavering, even in the face of the darkest forces, temptation and idolatry. Another chilling theory is that Satan planned to use Moses' body as an idol, diverting the Israelites from true worship of God. Imagine the temptation of turning a sacred symbol into an object of idolatry. Let's talk about one of God's deepest fears regarding the people of Israel: idolatry. And yes, this is directly linked to Satan's interest in Moses' body. So why was idolatry such a big problem? Let's find out. First, think about this. Moses was not just a leader, he was a living legend for the Israelites. He brought them out of slavery, spoke directly with God, and delivered the divine laws. After all this, it is not hard to imagine how the people could easily start to idolize Moses, even after his death. Now, imagine if the people knew exactly where Moses' tomb was. It would be very easy to turn that place into a site of pilgrimage and worship. This is where Satan comes in. He wanted to use Moses' body to divert the worship that was due only to God. Satan knew that if he could turn Moses into an idol, he could undermine the people's faith and divert them from the true focus of worship. And, let's be realistic, the Israelites already had a complicated history with idolatry. Remember the golden calf? While Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments, the people were down there worshipping a golden statue. It was a total disaster. So the idea of idolizing Moses' tomb was not that far-fetched. God knew this and, to avoid this trap, decided to bury Moses in a secret place. It was a way to protect the people from themselves, from their inclinations to seek tangible figures to worship instead of focusing on God, who cannot be seen. Satan wanted to exploit this weakness. If he could make the Israelites idolize Moses, he would be diverting their attention from the one true God. It was a cunning plan to corrupt the purity of worship and introduce confusion and disobedience. This attempt by Satan reminds us of something very important: our human tendency to seek tangible things to worship. It may not be a golden calf or a prophet's tomb today, but we all have our modern idols, things or people we place in God's place in our lives. It could be career, money, status, or even relationships. So this story is not just an ancient tale. It is a continuous warning to all of us about the importance of keeping our worship focused exclusively on God. We need to be aware of the temptations to place other things at the center of our lives. In the end, Satan's attempt to use Moses' body to incite idolatry was thwarted by God's wisdom and protection. But it is a powerful reminder that we need to be ever vigilant, keeping our hearts and worship pure, focused on the only one who deserves it, God. So, when you think of Moses and Satan's interest in his body, remember that this story is a mirror for our own lives. It challenges us to examine where we are placing our worship and to ensure we are focused on what truly matters. Accusation of past sins. Satan, the eternal accuser, could have sought to highlight Moses' past sins, such as the murder of the Egyptian, to discredit him before God. Even the greats are vulnerable to dark accusations. Let's now dive into a very delicate and intriguing point of this story: the accusation of Moses' past sins by Satan. And, folks, if there's someone who loves to throw our mistakes in our faces, it's the devil himself. So, imagine the scene. Satan is there, waiting, with a ready list of Moses' sins. He didn't just want Moses' body for the sake of it, he had a malicious plan behind it. He wanted to use Moses' mistakes to discredit him completely, not only before the people of Israel but also before God. Moses, despite being a great leader, was not perfect. Remember that time he killed an Egyptian? That was at the beginning when he was still discovering his true identity and mission. And then, that famous disobedience when he, instead of speaking to the rock as God had commanded, struck it with his staff to bring forth water. These moments are blemishes on Moses' record that Satan would love to rub in everyone's faces. Satan is known as the accuser. In Revelation 12:10, he is described as the one who accuses God's followers day and night. He tries to bring us down using our own mistakes against us, trying to prove that we are not worthy of God's love and grace. And that's exactly what he wanted to do with Moses. Imagine Satan with Moses' body, pointing out every flaw, every mistake, saying, "This is the leader you chose, God? Look at his mistakes." It's a classic move of Satan, using our worst moments to try to define and destroy us. But then comes the wonderful grace of God. God does not only see our mistakes, he sees the whole picture. He knows our hearts, our intentions, and our faith. Moses was a man of God despite his flaws. And God chose to protect him, even in death, from Satan's malicious desire to turn him into a symbol of failure. This episode reminds us that we all have our sins and moments of weakness. Satan may try to accuse us and make us feel unworthy, but God sees beyond that. He sees our journey, our growth, and our efforts to follow his path. So, the next time you feel crushed by your own mistakes, remember Moses. He made mistakes, but he was still one of the greatest leaders in biblical history. God used him in incredible ways despite his flaws. And just as God protected Moses from Satan's accusations, he also protects us and gives us grace. The story of the accusations against Moses is a powerful reminder that no matter how much Satan tries to bring us down, God's grace is greater. It is a call for all of us to trust in God's love and mercy, even when facing our worst errors. So, keep the faith, folks. Don't let past mistakes define who you are. Learn from them, grow, and move forward, knowing that God is on your side, protecting and guiding you, just as he did with Moses. Mockery of the divine plan. Possessing Moses' body would be a way for Satan to mock God's power, a perverse attempt to subvert divine designs and discredit celestial justice. Okay, Folks, now let's delve into a very bold and, let's be honest, very evil aspect of the story: Satan's attempt to mock the divine plan. This is one of those moments that make us think, seriously, Satan? Do you think you can actually win? So, imagine the scene. Satan doesn't just want Moses' body to do his usual evil deeds. He wants to mock God's plan. For him, getting Moses' body would be like a trophy of victory, a way of saying, look, God, even your chosen one is in my hands. Think about it. Moses was the great leader chosen by God to free the Israelites. He was the intermediary between God and the people, the guy who received the 10 Commandments and led the Israelites through the desert for decades. For Satan, discrediting Moses would be a way to undermine the people's confidence in God and his plans. And isn't that how the devil always acts? He loves to try to subvert and destroy everything that is sacred. Satan wanted to turn Moses' legacy into a fiasco, a symbol of failure, something he could use to question God's authority and wisdom. Imagine Satan displaying Moses' body as a trophy, as if to say, see, even your greatest leader is vulnerable. Even he couldn't follow everything perfectly. It would be a way for Satan to try to prove that God's plans can be frustrated, that even God's chosen ones are not infallible. But here's where the story gets good. God, in his infinite wisdom, didn't let that happen. He didn't give Satan the chance to mock his plans. God personally buried Moses in an unknown location, protecting his body and legacy from Satan's malicious clutches. This act of God was not just a measure of protection but also a powerful reminder of who is really in control. No matter how much Satan tries, he will never be able to win against divine plans. God's wisdom and power are incomparable. The supremacy of the divine. Despite his wicked schemes, the wisdom, power, and love of God are incomparably superior. The dispute over Moses' body is a testimony of divine protection and the certainty that God's plans cannot be thwarted. Now, let's talk about something that really gives us that sense of security and peace: the supremacy of the divine. When we think of Moses' story and all of Satan's attempts to mess things up, it's important to remember one fundamental thing: God is in absolute control. Always. Think with me. Satan tried everything to get Moses' body. He wanted to discredit Moses, turn his body into an idol, accuse him of past mistakes, and even mock God's plans. But guess what? None of that worked. Why? Because God is supreme. He is infinitely more powerful than any evil plan Satan can devise. This story shows us that no matter how much evil tries to hit us, God's power is always greater. God buried Moses in an unknown location, protecting him from all of Satan's schemes. This is clear proof that God takes care of his own and that his plans are infallible. And this message is super important for us today. Sometimes life can seem like a mess, full of problems and obstacles that seem insurmountable. It can seem like we are surrounded by negative forces, trying to bring us down at every step. But Moses' story reminds us that we are not alone. God is always in command, and his plans are perfect. This divine supremacy is not just an abstract concept. It is a tangible reality that we can feel and experience in our lives. It is the certainty that, even in the darkest moments, there is a divine light guiding and protecting us. God not only knows the future, he is shaping it, ensuring that all his plans are fulfilled. So, when you feel lost or helpless, remember Moses' story. Remember how God protected his body from Satan and ensured his legacy remained intact. This is a reflection of how God takes care of you. He knows every detail of your life, every challenge you face, and is always working for your good. The supremacy of the divine is an incredible source of comfort and strength. Knowing that God is in control gives us the courage to keep going, even when the road seems difficult. It is a reminder that, no matter how much evil tries to bring us down, God's goodness and power are unbeatable. So, the next time you face a difficult situation, take a moment and think of Moses' story. Let this story remind you that God is supreme, that he is in control, and that his plans for you are of peace and prosperity. Trust him, and you will see that even in the storms, there is a divine security that never fails. The lesson of true worship. This story reminds us of the importance of resisting idolatry and keeping our faith firmly anchored in God. True worship must be pure and unwavering, free from worldly temptations. Okay, folks, let's talk about a lesson that is fundamental in Moses' story: true worship. We already know that the Israelites had a somewhat complicated history with idolatry, right? From the golden calf to other attempts to worship tangible things, they were always straying from the right path. God buried Moses in a secret place precisely to prevent the people from turning his tomb into an object of worship. True worship must be directed only to God, not to human figures, no matter how important they are. This is a powerful reminder that our faith must always be anchored in the divine and not in objects or people. So, let's focus on true worship and keep our eyes on God. The fatal sin and the death of Moses. Before reaching the promised land, Moses made a terrible mistake by disobeying God, striking the rock instead of speaking to it. This act of anger and despair had severe consequences, preventing him from seeing the fulfillment of his divine mission. The secret burial of Moses. After his death, God buried Moses in an unknown location, away from mortal eyes. This mysterious burial is one of the most enigmatic events in Scripture, a divine protection against malevolent forces. The celestial dispute. And then something astounding happened, a fierce dispute between Archangel Michael and Satan over the body of Moses. This is not a fairy tale but a dark reality mentioned in the book of Jude, verse 9. Michael and Satan, in a titanic struggle, fought a battle whose echoes still reverberate today. The sinister interest of Satan. Why did Satan, the prince of darkness, desire Moses' body so much? One possibility is that he wanted to prevent Moses' resurrection, trying to challenge and subvert divine plans. Temptation and idolatry. Another chilling theory is that Satan planned to use Moses' body as an idol, diverting the Israelites from true worship of God. Imagine the temptation of turning a sacred symbol into an object of idolatry. Accusation of past sins. Satan, the eternal accuser, could have sought to highlight Moses' past sins, such as the murder of the Egyptian, to discredit him before God. Even the greats are vulnerable to dark accusations. Mockery of the divine plan. Possessing Moses' body would be a way for Satan to mock God's power, a perverse attempt to subvert divine designs and discredit celestial justice. The supremacy of the divine. Despite his wicked schemes, the wisdom, power, and love of God are incomparably superior. The dispute over Moses' body is a testimony of divine protection and the certainty that God's plans cannot be thwarted. The lesson of true worship. This story reminds us of the importance of resisting idolatry and keeping our faith firmly anchored in God. True worship must be pure and unwavering, free from worldly temptations. Reflections on divine grace. Despite Moses' mistakes, God's grace is evident in his divine protection. This act of personally burying Moses symbolizes the eternal bond between the Creator and his faithful servant. Now, let's talk about something that warms the heart: divine grace. Even with all of Moses' mistakes and failures, God's grace was always present. God not only forgave Moses but also honored him by personally burying him. This shows that God's grace is greater than any sin or failure we might have. We all make mistakes, but Moses' story reminds us that God always offers us a second chance. Divine grace is an incredible gift, and we should remember this in our own lives. No matter how far we think we've fallen, God's grace is always there, welcoming us back. Vigilance against evil. Despite Satan's diabolical schemes, God's wisdom, power, and love are supremely superior, protecting his plans from any malignant interference. So, folks, Moses' story also gives us a great lesson about vigilance against evil. Satan was constantly trying to divert Moses' path and the people of Israel. This shows us that we need to be always alert because evil is lurking, trying to bring us down. We need to be like Archangel Michael, always ready to resist temptations and attacks from the enemy. With faith and vigilance, we can protect ourselves from the devil's schemes and stay firm on the right path. So, let's stay alert and keep our faith strong, always ready to resist temptations. The power of redemption. Moses' story reminds us of the importance of true worship. We must resist the temptations of idolatry and keep our faith firmly anchored in God. One of the most powerful messages from Moses' story is about the power of redemption. Even with his mistakes, Moses was redeemed by God. This shows us that no matter what we have done, there is always hope for redemption. God is always ready to forgive us and guide us back to the right path. Redemption is proof of God's love and mercy. So, when we feel lost or discouraged, we should remember that God is always willing to give us a new chance. It's a message of hope and renewal that we all need. The eternal message. To conclude, Moses' story leaves us with an eternal message: divine protection, true worship, grace, vigilance against evil, and the power of redemption are fundamental pillars for our spiritual life. This message connects us deeply with God's teachings and strengthens us in faith. And now, a special request for you. If you enjoyed this video and felt that these messages touched your heart, don't forget to share it with your friends and family. Leave your comments, because we love to hear what you have to say, and it is important to us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting content like this. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this spiritual journey with us. May God bless each of you, and may we continue to grow together in faith and divine love. Until the next video, folks.